The sound of small feet on marble floors changed everything. Harrison Coleman had spent the last 3 years perfecting the art of silence in his Chicago penthouse, where every surface gleamed and every corner held no memories. But that December afternoon, when 2 little girls appeared at his building entrance through the swirling snow, their voices cut through his carefully constructed quiet like nothing ever had. The older one, maybe 9, stood with shoulders squared and eyes that had seen too much. Her little sister clutched a faded, stuffed elephant, shivering in a coat too thin for the brutal wind. When she spoke, her words landed like stones in still water. "Mr. Coleman, our mama said you used to care about people before you got scared. Welcome to my channel, where I share real stories with unexpected twists. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe and give me a thumbs up. It really means a lot to me." Now, let's begin this story. Harrison Coleman owned half of downtown Chicago, but he lived like a ghost in his own life. At 42, he had built Coleman Properties into an empire of glass towers and profitable developments, each project a monument to his need for control. His penthouse on the 53rd floor reflected this obsession with order. Minimalist furniture, neutral colors, and not a single photograph in sight. The only warmth came from a gas fireplace that he rarely bothered to light. 3 years earlier, everything had been different. He had been different. Wesley, his 7-year-old son, had filled their home with laughter and chaos. Toy cars scattered across Persian rugs, finger paintings taped to stainless steel refrigerators, and bedtime stories that stretched long into the night. But a drunk driver on a rainy Tuesday had ended all of that, leaving Harrison with nothing but an empty house and a heart that had closed like a fist. Work became his refuge. 18-hour days, weekend conferences, anything to avoid the silence that Wesley used to fill. His ex-wife Claire had tried to reach him in those first months, her own grief seeking connection, but Harrison had already learned that loving someone meant losing them. Better to feel nothing than to risk that pain again. On this particular December afternoon, Harrison was reviewing acquisition plans for a new hotel chain when his assistant buzzed the intercom. "Mr. Coleman, there are 2 children in the lobby asking for you specifically. Security is not sure what to do." Harrison frowned, setting down his tablet. Children never came to his building, especially not asking for him personally. Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see snow falling steadily over the city, the kind of storm that kept most people indoors. "Tell security to call social services," he said, reaching for his coffee. "Sir, they mentioned your son Wesley by name." The coffee mug stopped halfway to his lips. No one talked about Wesley anymore. Harrison had made sure of that. He set the mug down with deliberate care, his hand trembling slightly. 5 minutes later, he stood in the marble lobby, staring at 2 of the smallest people he had ever seen. Brave a Chicago blizzard. The older girl had dark skin and eyes that reminded him of old photographs, the kind that captured too much truth. Her little sister, lighter-skinned with curly hair escaping from a knitted hat, pressed close to her side. Their clothes were clean but worn, and both carried the unmistakable weight of children who had learned to be careful. "You are Mr. Coleman," the older girl said. Not a question. Harrison nodded slowly. "What are you doing here?" "Our mama died yesterday morning. she said, her voice steady as stone. Before she got sick, she used to clean offices downtown. She remembered you from the children's charity event 3 years ago, the one where your little boy handed out toys. Harrison's chest tightened. He remembered that day. Wesley had insisted on personally giving every child a present, his small hands carefully placing teddy bears and books into eager arms. It had been 2 months before the accident. "She said you were different then," the girl continued. "Said you looked at kids like they mattered, not like they were problems to solve. She told us if something ever happened, we should find you." The little girl tugged at her sister's coat. "Olive, I'm cold." Olive. The older one was named Olive. She pulled her sister closer, her own thin jacket doing little against the lobby's chill. "What are your names?" Harrison asked, his voice rougher than intended. "I'm Olive Coleman Martinez," she said, lifting her chin. "This is my sister Quinn. We don't have anywhere else to go." Harrison studied them, noting the way Olive positioned herself slightly in front of Quinn, how her eyes never left his face, watching for signs of rejection or threat. She was protecting her sister the same way he had once protected Wesley from thunderstorms and scraped knees. The building's security guard cleared his throat. "Sir, what would you like me to do?" Harrison looked at the girls again. Snow melted in small puddles around their worn boots. Quinn's lips had a faint blue tinge that spoke of too many hours in the cold. Through the lobby's windows, the storm showed no signs of stopping. He thought about his empty penthouse, about the silence that had become his companion. He thought about Wesley's voice echoing in these same halls 3 years ago, excited about seeing Santa Claus at the Christmas party Harrison had hosted for the children's hospital. "Come upstairs," he heard himself say. "Both of you." Olive studied his face for a long moment, then nodded once. She took Quinn's hand and followed him to the elevator, their small footsteps echoing in the vast space. As the elevator rose toward his penthouse, Harrison caught his reflection in the polished doors. For the first time in 3 years, he was not alone. The realization both terrified and comforted him in ways he could not yet understand. Sometimes the most ordinary days hide extraordinary possibilities. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, legal paperwork, and 2 little girls turning his sterile penthouse into something resembling a home. Harrison had contacted Child Protective Services immediately, but the system was overwhelmed, especially during the holiday season. The caseworker, a tired woman named Patricia Ramirez, had agreed to temporary emergency placement while they sorted through the girls' situation. "Understand, Mr. Coleman," Patricia had said during her home visit. "This is highly irregular. We typically don't place children with unmarried men who have no prior fostering experience." Harrison had nodded, signing document after document. He told himself this was temporary, a humanitarian gesture that would end as soon as proper arrangements were made. But as he watched Olive help Quinn brush her teeth using a step stool he had ordered from Amazon, something inside his chest began to crack open. The girls had lost their mother to pneumonia, Patricia explained. No father listed on either birth certificate, no known relatives willing or able to care for them. They had been living in a studio apartment on the South Side, surviving on their mother's cleaning jobs and government assistance. "Mama got real sick last month," Olive had told him matter-of-factly as she made peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. She kept coughing and couldn't get warm. We tried to take care of her, but the medicine cost too much." Harrison had excused himself to the bathroom, where he gripped the marble countertop and tried to breathe through the familiar weight of helplessness. He knew what it felt like to watch someone you loved slip away, powerless to stop it. By the third day, patterns had emerged. Olive woke early and made breakfast, moving through his kitchen with the competence of someone who had been responsible for more than herself for a long time. Quinn hummed while she colored, her elephant never far from reach. Both girls asked permission for everything, from using the bathroom to touching the television remote. "You don't have to ask," Harrison had said gently. "This is your space too, for now." But Olive's eyes remained watchful, and Quinn still jumped when he moved too quickly. They had learned not to take up too much room, not to expect permanence. The first real complication arose on Thursday morning when Harrison's phone rang during breakfast. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "This is Harrison Coleman." "Mr. Coleman, my name is Tristan Valdez. I understand you have my daughters." Harrison's blood went cold. Across the table, Olive had gone very still, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "I'm sorry. Who is this?" "Quinn's father," the voice said, smooth and confident. "I just learned about Maria's passing. Terrible tragedy. I'll be coming to collect my little girl this afternoon." Harrison looked at Quinn, who was carefully arranging cereal in her bowl, unaware of the conversation that might tear her world apart again. "Mr. Valdez, I'll need to see documentation, birth certificates, proof of paternity." Tristan laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "All in order, I assure you. I'll be at your building at 3 o'clock. The line went dead. Harrison set down his phone, his hand trembling slightly. "He found us," Olive whispered. "Who found you?" Olive's face had gone pale. "Tristan. He used to live with Mama before Quinn was born. He left when she got pregnant, said he wasn't ready for kids, but sometimes he'd come back when he needed money." Harrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. What happened when he came back? "Mama would give him whatever she had," Olive said quietly. "And Quinn would hide in the closet until he left. She's scared of loud voices now." Harrison looked at Quinn, still innocently eating her cereal, and felt a protective fury he hadn't experienced since Wesley's death. The intensity of it shocked him. These girls had been in his life for 3 days, but already the thought of someone hurting them made his vision narrow with rage. He called Patricia Ramirez immediately, but she was in court. Her voicemail message said she wouldn't be available until evening. He tried reaching his attorney, but got similar results. Everyone, it seemed, was busy living their lives while 2 little girls waited to learn their fate. At 2:30, Harrison's doorman called. "Mr. Coleman, there's a man here claiming to be family of the children. Says he has legal papers." "Send him up," Harrison said, though every instinct screamed against it. Tristan Valdez was exactly what Harrison had imagined. Mid-30s, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the hardness around his eyes. He carried a leather briefcase and the kind of smile that sold used cars and broken promises. "Mr. Coleman," Tristan said, extending his hand. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter during this difficult time." Harrison didn't take the offered hand. Behind him, he could hear Olive whispering urgently to Quinn in the kitchen. "I'll need to see those documents," Harrison said. Tristan opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Birth certificate, DNA test results, court order establishing paternity. All perfectly legal. Harrison scanned the papers, his lawyer's training helping him parse the language. Everything looked legitimate, but something felt wrong. The dates were recent, too recent. Why would someone wait 5 years to establish paternity unless they wanted something? "Where have you been for the last 5 years?" Harrison asked. "Building my business, getting my life together," Tristan replied smoothly. "I wasn't ready to be a father then, but I am now. Quinn deserves to be with her real family." From the kitchen came the sound of a chair, scraping across the floor, followed by Quinn's small voice. "I don't want to go." Tristan's smile never wavered. Children often have difficulty with transitions. "She'll adjust." Harrison stepped between Tristan and the kitchen doorway. "She's been through enough trauma for 1 week." "Which is exactly why she needs stability," Tristan said. "I can provide that. I have a house, a steady income, a family environment." Harrison studied the man's face, noting the way his eyes kept flicking toward the expensive artwork on the walls, the designer furniture, the view of the city that spoke of wealth beyond most people's comprehension. "How much?" Harrison asked quietly. Tristan's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "I'm sorry? How much money do you want to disappear?" The smile finally slipped. "I'm insulted, Mr. Coleman. I'm here for my daughter, not for profit." But Harrison had spent 20 years reading people across negotiation tables. He recognized greed when he saw it. "Get out," Harrison said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'll be back with the police," Tristan said, gathering his papers. "Quinn belongs with me, legally and morally." After Tristan left, Harrison found the girls huddled together on the living room couch. Quinn was crying silently into her elephant, while Olive rubbed her back with fierce protectiveness. Harrison knelt in front of them, his knees hitting the hardwood floor harder than intended. "I won't let him take you," he said, the words coming from somewhere deep and certain. "I promise." Olive met his eyes, searching for truth. "You can't promise that. Adults always leave." Harrison thought about Wesley, about promises he hadn't been able to keep, about love that hadn't been enough to prevent loss. But looking at these 2 broken little girls, he felt something he thought had died with his son, the fierce, irrational need to protect at any cost. "Then I'll be the first one who doesn't," he said. "Truth has a way of revealing itself when we need it most." The legal battle began immediately and escalated faster than Harrison had anticipated. Tristan Valdez had come prepared with more than just paperwork. He had a strategy, a lawyer, and what appeared to be legitimate documentation establishing his parental rights to Quinn. Harrison's attorney, Blake Peterson, laid out the stark reality during an emergency meeting. "He has biological claim, Harrison. The DNA test is legitimate, the paternity paperwork filed correctly. Unless we can prove he's unfit, the court will likely grant him custody." "There has to be something," Harrison said, pacing Blake's office while snow continued to fall outside. "Men don't disappear for 5 years and suddenly want custody unless they smell money." "Suspicion isn't evidence," Blake replied. "We need documented proof of neglect, abuse, or incapacity, and we need it fast. The hearing is scheduled for next Tuesday." Harrison felt the familiar sensation of walls closing in, the same helplessness he had experienced in the hospital waiting room 3 years ago, watching doctors shake their heads and explain that sometimes terrible things happened to good people. But this time, he refused to accept defeat. He hired a private investigator named Felix Wang, who specialized in family court cases. Within 24 hours, Felix had uncovered a pattern of concerning behavior. Tristan Valdez had a history of relationships with single mothers, though no previous paternity claims. His current address was a luxury apartment far beyond what his stated income could support. "He's targeting women with children," Felix explained during a hurried phone conference. "Gets involved, establishes himself as a father figure, then disappears when things get complicated. This is the first time he's come back, which suggests something changed." "Like what?" "Like he found out one of those children has access to a very wealthy guardian." The investigation revealed more troubling details. Witnesses from Tristan's past relationships described manipulative behavior, promises of support that never materialized, and a pattern of exploitation that left families worse off than before. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. Maria Martinez, the girl's mother, had kept a journal. Olive produced it on Sunday evening, pulling the worn notebook from a plastic bag that contained their few possessions. "Mama wrote in this every night," Olive said, handling the journal like something precious and fragile. "She wrote about Tristan, too." Harrison read Maria's words with growing anger and clarity. She had documented Tristan's verbal abuse, his financial manipulation, and his complete abandonment when she needed him most. The final entry, written just weeks before her death, contained a plea that chilled Harrison to the bone. "If something happens to me, don't let him near my babies. He'll hurt them like he hurt me. Find someone who will love them, not use them." Blake reviewed the journal entries with the careful attention of someone who understood their importance. "This could change everything," he said. "Combined with the investigators' findings, we might have grounds to challenge his fitness." But on Monday morning, their legal strategy faced an unexpected obstacle. Tristan's attorney filed a motion questioning Harrison's own fitness as a guardian. The document painted him as an emotionally unstable widower, using the children to fill a psychological void left by his son's death. "It's a fishing expedition," Blake assured him. "But it complicates things. They're going to argue that you're not thinking clearly, that your judgment is compromised by grief." Harrison stood in his empty penthouse that evening, watching the city lights blur beyond the windows. The girls were staying with Patricia Ramirez overnight, a precautionary measure before the hearing. The silence that had once comforted him now felt suffocating. His phone buzzed with a text from Olive, sent through Patricia's device. "Are you okay? Quinn is scared." Harrison stared at the message, remembering every bedtime story he had read to Wesley, every scraped knee he had bandaged, every nightmare he had chased away with promises that Daddy would keep him safe. He had failed his son, but he would not fail these girls. He typed back carefully. "Tell Quinn that some promises are stronger than fear. I'll see you tomorrow." The courtroom was smaller than Harrison had expected, with fluorescent lights that cast everything in harsh shadows. Judge Catherine Brooks presided with the tired efficiency of someone who had seen too many families torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. Tristan sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing a conservative suit and an expression of wounded fatherhood. His attorney painted a picture of a reformed man seeking to provide stability for his biological daughter. "My client has undergone significant personal growth," the attorney argued. "He now has steady employment, stable housing, and the emotional maturity to be the father Quinn deserves." Harrison's hands clenched into fists under the table as he listened to the careful lies and half-truths. Blake had prepared him for this, but watching someone manipulate the system to claim ownership of a child felt like watching Wesley's accident happen in slow motion. When Blake presented their evidence, the mood in the courtroom shifted. Maria's journal entries were read aloud, her words carrying the weight of truth across the sterile space. The investigators' findings painted a picture of systematic exploitation that made Tristan's attorney shift uncomfortably in his chair. But the moment that changed everything came when Judge Brooks asked to speak with the children privately. Quinn, wearing a dress Patricia had bought for the occasion, walked to the witness stand, clutching her elephant. Her voice was barely audible as she answered the judge's gentle questions. "Do you remember Mr. Valdez?" Judge Brooks asked. Quinn nodded, her eyes downcast. "Can you tell me about those memories?" "He made Mama cry," Quinn whispered, and his voice was scary. "I hid so he wouldn't see me." "What about Mr. Coleman? How do you feel when you're with him?" For the first time, Quinn looked directly at Harrison. Her voice grew stronger. "He makes pancakes with smiley faces, and he doesn't shout, and when I have bad dreams, he sits with me until they go away." Olive's testimony was more direct. She looked straight at Tristan as she spoke, her 9-year-old voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed too much. "He's not our daddy," she said firmly. "Our daddy is the person who chooses us every day, not the person who shows up when it's convenient." Judge Brooks retired to consider her decision, while Harrison waited in the hallway with his chest tight and his hands shaking. Through the courthouse windows, he could see new snow beginning to fall, each flake catching the afternoon light before disappearing into the gray. When they were called back into the courtroom, Judge Brooks looked directly at Harrison before she spoke. "Biology creates children," she said, "but daily care creates families. Based on the evidence presented, I am denying the petitioner's claim for custody and granting full guardianship to Harrison Coleman." Harrison's knees went weak with relief. Across the courtroom, Tristan's face twisted with barely contained rage before his attorney whispered urgently in his ear. They gathered their papers and left without another word. As they walked out of the courthouse, Quinn slipped her small hand into Harrison's. Olive walked on his other side, her shoulders finally relaxed. "Are we really a family now?" Quinn asked, her voice bright with hope. Harrison looked down at both girls, these small miracles who had crashed into his careful isolation and rebuilt his capacity for love. 3 months ago, he had been a man afraid of feeling anything. Now he was someone willing to fight the entire world to protect 2 little girls who had chosen to trust him. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We're really a family. Rock bottom becomes the foundation on which we rebuild." 6 months later, Harrison's penthouse had undergone a transformation that reflected more than simple redecorating. The minimalist spaces had given way to lived-in comfort. Quinn's artwork covered the refrigerator, while Olive's books created small reading nooks throughout the apartment. The gas fireplace now burned every evening, casting warm light over homework sessions and family movie nights. Harrison had made changes too, beyond the obvious ones. He had hired a deputy at Coleman Properties, allowing him to leave the office by 6 o'clock most evenings. Weekends were sacred family time, protected from business calls and development meetings. His success still mattered, but it no longer defined him. The legal victory had been complete and final. Tristan Valdez had disappeared as quickly as he had appeared, though Felix Wang's continued investigation suggested he had moved on to another city, another vulnerable family. Harrison had quietly funded a legal aid foundation that helped single mothers navigate custody challenges, Maria's journal serving as inspiration for protecting other families from similar exploitation. But the real transformation had been internal, a gradual healing that surprised Harrison with its gentleness. Grief for Wesley would always be part of him, but it no longer dominated every moment. Instead, it had become something more complex, a reminder that love was worth the risk of loss. The memorial garden had been Olive's idea, though she hadn't called it that initially. "We should plant something for the people who aren't here anymore," she had said one spring morning, pointing to the empty planters on the penthouse balcony. They had chosen, carefully, Quinn insisting on flowers that would bloom in different seasons. "So there's always something growing," she had explained with 5-year-old logic that cut straight to truth. Harrison had added a small plaque, simply engraved. "For Wesley, who taught us how to love. For Maria, who trusted us with her greatest treasures." The garden had become their quiet space for remembering and looking forward, a place where grief and gratitude could coexist. On this particular evening, Harrison found himself watching the girls from the kitchen as they worked on a puzzle at the dining room table. Olive helped Quinn sort pieces by color, their heads bent together in concentration. The scene was so ordinary, so peaceful, that he had to stop and remember how afraid he had been of exactly this kind of contentment. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Ramirez, now a friend as much as a caseworker. "How are my favorite success stories?" Harrison typed back. "Olive got into the gifted program. Quinn learned to ride a bike. We're building something beautiful." Patricia's response came quickly. "You all are. Give them my love." He had learned that building a family was like tending the memorial garden, requiring daily attention and patience. Some days were harder than others, especially when the girls wrestled with memories of their mother or fears about the future. But consistency had proven more powerful than perfection. Olive still checked the locks twice before bed, a habit from their old life that might never completely fade. Quinn sometimes woke from nightmares, calling for her mother before remembering where she was. But both girls had learned to accept comfort, to believe that tomorrow would come with the same steady love as today. "Harrison," Quinn called from the dining room, his name coming easily now instead of the formal Mr. Coleman she had used for weeks. "Can you help us find the edge pieces?" He joined them at the table, settling into his chair with the satisfaction of someone who belonged exactly where he was. The puzzle was 1,000 pieces, an ambitious project Olive had chosen because she liked challenges. "The secret," Harrison said, examining a piece with careful attention, "is not to force things that don't fit, Sometimes you have to try different combinations before you find the right match. Olive looked up at him with a knowing smile. Are we still talking about puzzles? Harrison laughed, the sound coming easier than it had in years. Maybe not entirely. As they worked together in comfortable silence, Harrison thought about the man he had been 6 months ago, so certain that safety lay in keeping everyone at a distance. He had built walls, thinking they would protect him from pain, but they had only protected him from joy. The girls had taught him that love was not a transaction or a guarantee against loss. It was a daily choice, a commitment renewed each morning when you chose to show up for someone else's life. They had given him purpose beyond profit, meaning beyond success. When the puzzle was finally complete near bedtime, they stood back to admire their work. The image showed a lighthouse standing against stormy seas, its beam cutting through darkness to guide ships safely home. That's us, Quinn said softly, pointing to the lighthouse. We help people find their way. Harrison pulled both girls close, feeling the weight and warmth of them against his sides. Through the windows, the city spread out below them, millions of people navigating their own storms and seeking their own safe harbors. Yes, he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. That's exactly what we do. Later, after the girls were asleep and the apartment had settled into its evening quiet, Harrison stood in the memorial garden. The spring flowers were beginning to bloom, adding color to the space where grief and gratitude intertwined, like the roots beneath the soil. He thought about Maria Martinez, the woman he had never met who had trusted him with her most precious gifts. He thought about Wesley, whose memory had nearly prevented him from accepting new love. And he thought about the 2 little girls sleeping down the hall, who had saved him as surely as he had saved them. The healing had not been instant or perfect. There were still difficult days, moments when fear tried to convince him that caring too much would only lead to heartbreak. But he had learned that a heart broken open was different from a heart broken apart. One could still love, still choose hope, still build something beautiful from the pieces. His phone buzzed one final time, a message from an unknown number. His breath caught until he read the words, "Thank you for keeping your promise. Love, Olive and Quinn." Below was a photo they had taken earlier, the 3 of them laughing over the completed puzzle. Harrison saved the image, then typed back, "Thank you for teaching me that some promises are stronger than fear. Love always, Harrison." He stood in the garden for a few more minutes, watching the city lights twinkle like stars, before heading inside to check on his daughters one more time. In the morning, there would be breakfast to make, school lunches to pack, and 1,000 small acts of love that built families one day at a time. He had finally learned the difference between a house and a home. A house was walls and windows, security systems, and expensive furniture. A home was the sound of small feet on marble floors, the trust of children who called your name in the dark, and the daily choice to love someone more than you loved your own safety. The strongest families are built not on avoiding loss, but on choosing love anyway. If this story touched your heart, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Share a moment when someone chose to love you when they did not have to. And if you believe in stories that remind us what family really means, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Sometimes the most ordinary days hold the power to change everything.